I'm late to the party making this video. And, in a way, I'm glad. I spent hours thinking about how I should start this video. This is what I came up with. Rather than starting the video in a clever way, I'd like to start it with the reason I didn't want to make it in the first place. The last few years have been tumultuous, to say the least. From civil unrest, an economy on the brink of collapse, and food shortages. These have culminated into heightened tensions, often in our own backyard. Best friends have become strangers due to heated political debates. Perfect strangers become enemies with a mere keystroke. And everyone is convinced that their opinion is fact. Tolerance for opposing viewpoints seems to have vanished. These are the reasons I didn't want to make this video. But unfortunately, this subject is unavoidable. And the time to talk about it is now.
A new proposal by the Department of Labor could mean higher prices on rideshare and food delivery apps. Workers in the industry say they want more benefits.
Is that what we asked for? What would that look like? And more importantly, what would the cost be to us? And would that cost be worth it? What is going on, everybody? My name is Zach. I hope you are doing well. Before we get into the video, if you are new here, please do consider pressing the like and subscribe buttons so you never miss news, tips, tricks, and ride-alongs with a healthy dose of humor. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, you'll know that I do not interject my political opinions into my videos, nor do I allow it in my comment section. I'm of the mindset that everybody has a political opinion that they are entitled to, but YouTube is not the place to discuss it. However, something's festering in the highest levels of our government that could potentially negatively impact all of us. This is something that we need to address before it's too late. As always, I will be keeping my political opinions out of the video and sticking only to the subject at hand. Although it may be difficult due to the subject matter of this video, I ask that you avoid making politically fueled comments as well. And most importantly, please be respectful to others in the comment section. We can have a difference in opinion and still be civil to each other. With that said, let's get into it. On October 11th, the Department of Labor announced that they'll be proposing a rule change that could challenge our independent contractor status. Now, obviously I'm not a lawyer, and I would be lying if I said I understood everything I read when I did my research for this video. With that said, I want to give a massive shout out and thank you to my friend Steve from the Rideshare Rodeo podcast and YouTube channel for helping me navigate this frankly confusing subject. If you haven't checked out Steve yet, you need to. You can find links in the description. So, what's changing? The U.S. Department of Labor has issued a rule change proposal that will likely see independent contractors reclassified as W-2 employees. Now, in the video I made talking about the high pay order program, I said that the Federal Trade Commission would be investigating and monitoring various companies within the delivery space. In that video, I also said that the FTC would not be pushing for a change in our independent contractor status. Although the FTC did make that announcement, I immediately ate my words when the Department of Labor announced that they would be pushing for a change in our independent contractor status. Federal agencies work independent of each other, which is exactly why we're seeing the FTC say one thing and the DOL say another thing. So why is the DOL proposing this rule change? Well, they claim it's to ensure more workers have federal protections. Protections such as paid sick days, health insurance, and a minimum wage. Now, on the surface, that sounds great, but let's unpack this and see what that would mean for you. Let's start with the fact that 68% of gig workers do this as a side hustle. With that said, it's a pretty safe assumption that most gig workers would be covered with health insurance by their employer. And let's not forget, the health insurance part of this would likely only apply to full-time drivers if this proposal goes through. So what about the minimum wage protections? Well, that's likely going to vary wildly depending on your state. My interpretation of the proposed rule change is that the individual states as well as the IRS would have the option to enforce this. After hours of research, the general consensus that I gathered is that most states would likely align themselves with the federal regulations. So, in plain English, what does that mean? The federal government says jump, and the states say how high. California drivers, you tell me if you could survive on $15 an hour. Now, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. This would override states that have a lower minimum wage than $7.25 an hour. And believe it or not, they do exist. This is substantially less than most of us currently make, at least if you're doing it right. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, yeah, Zach, but we're going to get tips on top of that. But are we? Doordash, for example, during earnings calls, has bragged about lowering consumer costs. Personally, I wouldn't put it past these companies to take away the tip screen entirely. Keep in mind, we're talking about them having the ability to lower the customer's order cost by up to 30%. That would lower consumer costs, likely increase their business volume, and we would end up paying the price for it. Remember, it is going to cost them substantially more to have us classified as W-2 employees versus independent contractors. They are going to try to recoup that money somehow. Let me know in the comments if you could see them getting rid of the tip screen entirely. It's also worth mentioning that it is federally legal for companies to tell us we can't moonlight for another company. That means no more multi-apping. That means you are going to work for Doordash or Uber Eats or Grubhub, so on, but you're likely going to have to pick just one. You effectively will have a ceiling on the amount of money you can earn. That ceiling, of course, being your state's minimum wage. Now, if you're in a state that either doesn't have a minimum wage or your state's minimum wage falls below the federal minimum of $7.25 an hour, that would be your ceiling. In addition, on a federal level, there is no legal requirement for employers to reimburse their employees when using their own personal vehicles for their job duties. So if they're not legally required to pay for our gas, you know that they're not legally required to pay for our maintenance either. This proposed rule change left me with so many more questions than answers. The way I interpreted this, there is the very real chance that we will make minimum wage and then have to deduct our expenses from that, including our gas. And that begs another interesting question. If we're W-2 employees of these various companies, what happens to our employment status when our cars inevitably break down? So now that we've deduced that they are not legally required to compensate us for our gas or maintenance, how much of that minimum wage are we actually pocketing? After all, many of us do fill our gas tanks multiple times a week and drive excessive miles. In addition, as a W-2 employee of one of these various companies, there's the very real possibility that we may no longer have a decline button. We would have to take what we're given. Now, of course, this is just my own speculation, but is it far-fetched to think that an order would just automatically accept for us? Let me know in the comment section. This proposed rule change effectively nullifies every freedom that we have enjoyed as independent contractors. When was the last time you looked at your boss and said, "Nah, I'm good. I don't feel like doing that"? If this rule change gets adopted, you can kiss that privilege goodbye. In 2021, 16% of American adults participated in some form of gig work. That is over 41 million people. According to Fortune.com, currently, Doordash has approximately 8,600 W-2 employees. But how many independent contractors drive for Doordash? Well, exact numbers are hard to find. 2 million seems to be the average number that pops up. So it's safe to assume that these companies also enjoy milking the independent contractor model. But there's a problem there. 8,600 versus 2 million? Those numbers are drastically different. For perspective, Walmart employs 2.2 million people globally. If Doordash were to hire every active Dasher, that would make them the second largest employer in the world. Do you think that a company that has never reported a profit could afford to hire anywhere near 2 million people? So what happens to the rest of us? I'd be willing to bet that we're not going to qualify for unemployment benefits. This proposed rule change left so many questions unanswered. Another unanswered question is, who would actually get hired? Is it going to be the person who's been driving for 5 years? Or is it going to be the driver with a 100% acceptance rate? The truth of the matter is, the majority of us spend less than 10 hours a week doing gig work. 41% of us to be exact. Whereas only 8% of us spend more than 30 hours a week doing this type of work. So, why is that? Well, in my opinion, that goes back to the fact that 68% of gig workers do this on the side. According to Pew Research, 58% of gig workers reported that their side hustle is essential or important for them to meet their basic needs. Keeping in mind that the vast majority of us are very part-time, largely due to other obligations, there is no guarantee that you will be hired, let alone get a schedule that works for you. Of course, I can't speak for you, but I would like to give you a little background on why I do gig work. I'm a 30-something-year-old, never married, single parent who's had custody of a son since he was a year and a half old. While this is absolutely a blessing, it's certainly come with some challenges along the way as well. This has included many curveballs that would frequently take me away from my regular job. Sick days only go so far when you accrue them as slowly as legally allowed. In the past, I've had to file FMLA because the challenges at home are pressing, and I just couldn't be at a W-2. Now, I don't know if you can legally do gig work when you're on FMLA, but what I do know is if I were doing gig work at the time, I could have worked when I was available, be it 3 p.m., or 3 a.m. While gig drivers do make up a very large percentage of independent contractors, there are a slew of professions that do rely on 1099 workers. An example of just a few of these would be a nurse, a home care professional, an IT professional, a court reporter, and of course, delivery drivers, among countless others. This rule change wasn't written solely with us in mind. That's why I'm left with so many more questions than answers. This proposed rule change is nothing more than a blanket policy that could negatively impact the livelihood of millions of Americans across multiple sectors. I want you to think about this on a personal level. What would this change look like in your life? Do you want to give up the freedom of setting your own hours? How would you feel about driving into a bad part of town at night because you can't decline orders as a W-2 employee? How do you feel about having no say or reimbursement for the miles put on your car? Do you want to be forced to drive for just one app? Do you want your earning potential limited by your state's minimum wage? And most important, do you have a plan if you are not brought on as a W-2 employee? If you feel like this proposed rule change begs more questions than answers, well, you're not alone. This was clearly not written with us in mind. Before we go any further in the video, please check the pinned comment. We're currently in a 45-day comment period where we can make our voices heard. This is your opportunity to join thousands of people, myself included, and tell the federal government that this proposal will devastate millions of lives. Please follow the link in the pinned comment to the Department of Labor's website and leave a comment about this proposed rule change. I implore you, do not skip this. Do this today. This is literally your livelihood at stake. They are going to put this through unless we stop it. The way I see it, this is the biggest hurdle that independent contractors in our nation have ever faced. Please spread the word. Please share this in your Facebook groups and Reddit. This is not something that we can simply sit by and watch to see how it plays out. Be as loud as you can and make your voice heard. If this proposed rule change is adopted, will you stay in this line of work or will you seek a different profession? Let me know in the comment section. So now that we've discussed the government's proposal, it's pretty clear to me that they have a lack of understanding of what we actually want. Towards the beginning of the video, I played a news clip where the news anchor said, workers in the industry want more benefits. The fact of the matter is, most of us are not asking for traditional benefits. We want the freedom to make educated decisions about how we choose to earn our own money. We want transparency, not W-2 status. Now, some of you might be thinking, speak for yourself, Zach. Well, I am speaking for myself and the overwhelming majority of drivers that do not support this proposed rule change. Matter of fact, I'm just going to show you. I followed up this poll with a community post asking what you would like to receive as an independent contractor that we don't already get. I received a ton of responses to that question, including a few that did tiptoe into the realm of employee. However, the single most common answer was transparency. Transparency. Isn't that what we really want? This proposed rule change is not beneficial for us. If the government truly wanted to help gig workers, this is what a piece of legislation should look like. Never hide tips. Accurate item counts before we accept the order. Not reducing our base pay when we accept a double. Removing scheduling entirely, because at the time of this video, we are still independent contractors and not employees. Full pickup and delivery addresses visible before we accept the order. Transparency. These all boil down to transparency. After all, a general contractor doesn't go into a project guessing or gambling about how much they're going to earn. We shouldn't have to either. The vast majority of us do not want W-2 status. We want transparency. Pause the video, follow the link in the pinned comment, and let me know when you've made your voice heard. I said it earlier in the video, and I'm going to say it again. This proposed rule change is something that every gig worker in America needs to know about. Something as simple as pressing the like or dislike button is something that you can do to tell YouTube that more drivers should see this video. Share this video in your Facebook groups or on Reddit. Text the link to your fellow drivers. Spread the word. One or two of us will not make a difference, but hundreds of thousands of us might. I would like to thank you for your time and attention on this very important subject.